It was March 27, 1976, and the most unlikely confrontation in entertainment history was about to unfold on live television. The Academy Awards ceremony, watched by 70 million Americans, had just reached its climax when presenter Muhammad Ali stepped to the microphone to announce Best Picture. What was supposed to be a routine presentation would instead become the most talked about moment in Oscar history. In the audience sat Clint Eastwood, Hollywood's ultimate tough guy, the man who had defined masculine strength for a generation through Dirty Harry and his Western roles. He had no idea that in the next 4 minutes, the heavyweight champion of the world was about to challenge everything America thought it knew about what real toughness meant. What Ali said, and how Eastwood responded, didn't just leave 70 million viewers speechless. It changed how an entire nation understood the difference between playing strong and being strong. This is the incredible true story of the night Muhammad Ali called out Hollywood's biggest star on live television, and why Eastwood's response became one of the most powerful moments ever broadcast in American television. If stories about unexpected moments that reveal true character move you, subscribe for more incredible encounters that prove the most profound truths often come from the most unlikely places. The 1976 Academy Awards were a spectacle unlike any other. It was the year One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest would sweep the major categories, but the real drama wasn't scripted. The ceremony was being held at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in Los Angeles, and the guest list read like a who's who of American culture: Elizabeth Taylor, Jack Nicholson, Robert De Niro, and sitting in the third row, stone-faced and characteristically stoic, Clint Eastwood. Muhammad Ali had been invited to present the Best Picture award as part of Hollywood's attempt to bridge the gap between sports and entertainment. At 34 years old, Ali was at the height of his fame, having recently defeated Joe Frazier in their epic Thrilla in Manila, and established himself as not just a boxer but a cultural phenomenon who transcended sports. Backstage, Ali was pacing in his tuxedo, but not because he was nervous about presenting. Producer William Friedkin noticed Ali studying a piece of paper intently. "What's that, Muhammad?" Friedkin asked. Ali looked up, his eyes serious in a way that surprised the veteran producer. "Billy, I need to ask you something. If I say what I really want to say out there tonight, will you back me up?" Friedkin was confused. "What do you mean? You're just presenting Best Picture." Ali folded the paper and put it in his jacket pocket. "Sometimes the most important things happen when nobody's expecting them. Tonight, I want to say something that matters. About movies. About truth." What Friedkin didn't know was that Ali had been deeply affected by something he'd seen earlier that week. He had visited a veterans hospital in Los Angeles, where he met soldiers returning from Vietnam, many of them broken physically and mentally by a war that had torn America apart. One soldier, a 22-year-old kid from Ohio named Tommy Martinez, had said something that stayed with Ali. "Mr. Ali, everybody thinks being tough means you don't feel pain, that you can take anything. But the toughest thing I ever did was admit I was scared. The toughest thing I ever did was ask for help." Ali had thought about those words for days, and as he prepared to take the stage at the Academy Awards, he realized he was about to use the biggest platform in entertainment to share that truth. The announcer's voice echoed through the pavilion. "Ladies and gentlemen, to present the award for Best Picture, 3-time heavyweight champion of the world, Muhammad Ali." The audience erupted in applause as Ali strode to the podium with his characteristic confidence. He looked out at the sea of Hollywood's elite, his eyes scanning the crowd until they found Clint Eastwood. For just a moment, the two men made eye contact. The fighter and the movie star, each representing a different kind of American masculinity. Ali began in his usual charismatic style. "Good evening, beautiful people of Hollywood. I'm here to present the biggest award of the night, but before I do that, I want to share something with all of you watching tonight." The teleprompter had no script for what came next. Ali's voice grew more serious. "This past week, I visited some real heroes. Not the kind you see in movies, but real heroes, soldiers coming home from Vietnam. And you know what I learned? I learned that the strongest man isn't the one who never gets hurt. The strongest man is the one who gets hurt and finds a way to heal, who gets scared and finds a way to be brave anyway." The audience was silent now, unsure where this was going. Ali looked directly at Clint Eastwood. "We got a lot of tough guys in Hollywood. Actors who play characters that never show fear, never show weakness, never ask for help, and Mr. Clint Eastwood, you're the best at it." Dirty Harry, the man with no name. You've built a career playing men who solve every problem with violence, who never show emotion, who think that being strong means being silent. The camera cut to Eastwood, whose expression remained impassive, but his eyes had sharpened with attention. Ali continued, his voice growing more passionate. But I want to challenge that idea tonight, in front of 70 million people. Because I think that kind of tough is the wrong kind of tough. I think real toughness is about standing up for what's right even when it costs you everything. Real toughness is about showing your feelings, admitting when you're wrong, asking for help when you need it. The audience was completely silent now. This wasn't the light entertainment they had expected from the Academy Awards. Mr. Eastwood, Ali said, addressing him directly, you're sitting right there, and I want to ask you something in front of everyone. When you play these characters that never show weakness, what message do you think that sends to young men who are struggling, who are scared, who need to know that it's okay to be vulnerable? The camera held on Eastwood's face. For a moment that seemed to last forever, he didn't move. The entire entertainment industry held its breath. This was unprecedented. A sports figure calling out one of Hollywood's biggest stars on live television, challenging not just him but the entire mythology of American masculinity that he represented. Then something extraordinary happened. Clint Eastwood stood up. The audience gasped audibly. Security personnel tensed, unsure what was about to unfold. Would this become a confrontation? Would Eastwood walk out? Would he respond with anger? Instead, Eastwood began to walk toward the stage. His face was serious, but there was something in his eyes that surprised everyone. Not anger, but recognition. As he reached the steps leading to the stage, the audience buzz grew louder. No one knew what was happening. Eastwood climbed the stairs and walked to the microphone where Ali stood waiting. The two men faced each other, the 6'4" boxer and the 6'4" actor, each representing a different vision of American strength. When Eastwood spoke, his voice was quiet but clear, and it carried through the pavilion with the same authority that had made him famous. Muhammad, you're absolutely right. 70 million people watching at home leaned forward. In the pavilion, you could hear a pin drop. Eastwood continued, his voice growing stronger. For 20 years, I've made movies where problems are solved with guns, where men don't talk about their feelings, where showing emotion is seen as weakness. And you know what? It's been eating at me for years. The camera showed faces in the audience. Jack Nicholson, Warren Beatty, Francis Ford Coppola, all watching with amazement as one of Hollywood's most private stars opened his heart on live television. I've gotten hundreds of letters, Eastwood said, from fathers telling me their sons won't talk to them about their problems because they think they have to be like Dirty Harry. From young men saying they feel like failures because they can't be like the man with no name. And I've wondered, what have I created? What have I contributed to? Eastwood turned to face the camera, speaking directly to the 70 million Americans watching. Muhammad is right. The characters I've played, they're fantasies. They're not real men. Real men struggle. Real men feel fear. Real men cry. They ask for help. They admit when they're wrong. And the strongest thing a man can do is exactly what Muhammad just did. Stand up and tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it challenges people's expectations. The audience was mesmerized. This wasn't the Clint Eastwood they knew from movies or interviews. This was a man speaking from his heart, admitting vulnerability in the most public way possible. I want to tell you about my father, Eastwood continued, his voice softer now. He fought in World War E, came home with what we now know was Pietzed, but back then they just called it being weak. He never talked about what he'd seen, never asked for help, never showed his pain. And it destroyed him. It destroyed our family. He died an alcoholic alone because he believed that real men don't need anybody. The silence in the pavilion was complete. Even the cameramen seemed transfixed by what they were witnessing. For 46 years, Eastwood said, I've been trying to be the kind of man my father thought he should be. Silent, strong, independent. But Muhammad, what you just said about those soldiers needing to know it's okay to be vulnerable, that hit me like a punch to the gut. Because if my father had heard that message, if he'd known it was okay to ask for help, he might still be alive. Eastwood's voice began to crack with emotion. And if the movies I've made have contributed to that problem, if I've helped perpetuate the idea that real men don't show feelings, then I owe an apology. Not just to those soldiers you met, but to every young man who's felt like he had to suffer in silence, because that's what Dirty Harry would do. Then, in front of 70 million people, Clint Eastwood did something that no one in that audience had ever seen him do in movies. His eyes filled with tears. "Muhammad, thank you for having the courage to call me out. Thank you for challenging me to think about what my work really means. And thank you for showing me what real toughness looks like." The two men embraced on stage, and the audience erupted. But it wasn't the usual polite Oscar applause. It was something deeper, more emotional. People were crying, standing, realizing they had witnessed something unprecedented. Ali spoke into the microphone, his arm around Eastwood's shoulder. "This is what I'm talking about, people. This man right here just showed more courage in 5 minutes than any movie hero ever did, because it takes real strength to admit you might be wrong. It takes real toughness to change." Then Ali delivered the line that would be quoted in newspapers across the country the next day, "Monsieur, Eastwood just proved that the strongest man is not the one who never falls down, but the one who gets back up and helps others get up too." When the ceremony ended, something remarkable happened. Instead of rushing to the after parties, clusters of people stayed in the pavilion, talking about what they'd witnessed. Jack Nicholson was overheard saying to Warren Beatty, "I've been in this business for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like that." But the real impact began the next day. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences received over 50,000 phone calls and letters in the following week. The overwhelming majority praised what had happened. Veterans organizations called it the most important moment in television history. Mental health advocates said it was a breakthrough that could save lives. More importantly, it changed both men's lives forever. Clint Eastwood returned to his hotel room that night and called his son Kyle, who was struggling with depression but had been too afraid to tell his father. "Son," Eastwood said, "I want you to know that it's okay to not be okay. And I'm here to help, not judge." Within a month, Eastwood had committed to a new project, a film about a Korean War veteran struggling with PTSD, called The Bridge Home. It would become his most critically acclaimed performance, earning him his first Oscar nomination for acting. Muhammad Ali, meanwhile, was flooded with invitations to speak at universities, veterans, hospitals, and mental health conferences. He began incorporating the lessons from that night into his speeches, always talking about the difference between movie toughness and real toughness. But perhaps the most powerful impact came from the letters that both men received from ordinary people. A father from Michigan wrote to Eastwood, "Mr. Eastwood, after watching you with Muhammad Ali, I finally had the conversation with my teenage son that I'd been avoiding for years. He's been struggling with anxiety, and I thought I was helping by telling him to be a man and tough it out. Last night, I told him I was sorry and that it's okay to ask for help. Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like." A veteran from Texas wrote to Ali, "Mr. Ali, I've been home from Vietnam for 5 years, but I never really came home until I watched you and Mr. Eastwood on TV. For the first time, I realized it's okay to admit I need help. I start therapy next week." The moment had ripple effects throughout Hollywood. Studios began green lighting projects that showed male protagonists dealing with emotional complexity. The strong, silent type began to evolve into more nuanced portrayals of masculinity. Years later, when asked about that night, Eastwood would say, "Muhammad Ali taught me that the most powerful thing an actor can do is not pretend to be invulnerable, but to show the courage it takes to be human. That night changed not just my career but my life." Ali, characteristically, put it more simply, sometimes the greatest victory is when your opponent becomes your teacher, and you both win. The 1976 Academy Awards ceremony is remembered today not for any movie that won, but for 4 minutes when two very different men proved that real strength comes not from the ability to hide your feelings, but from the courage to share them. In calling out Clint Eastwood, Muhammad Ali had intended to challenge Hollywood's definition of masculinity. Instead, he had created a moment of such honesty and vulnerability that it redefined what it meant to be strong. 70 million people watched Muhammad Ali call out Clint Eastwood on live television. What left them speechless wasn't a confrontation, but a conversation. Not a fight, but a friendship. Not the destruction of one man's image, but the transformation of two men's understanding of what real toughness means. Because sometimes the greatest battles are won not with fists or guns, but with the simple courage to tell the truth about what it means to be human.